Have you ever wondered what it would be like if one country was actually two completely different worlds, just sharing a flag? Well, that's pretty much the story of Antigua and Barbuda. We're going to dive into how these two Caribbean islands, legally bound together, are being pulled in opposite directions by nature, by history, and, you guessed it, by politics.
Okay, just look at this chart. It pretty much explains the entire dynamic we're about to explore. Antigua is the bigger, volcanic, hilly island, and it's home to virtually everybody. We're talking 98% of the population. And then you have Barbuda. It's flat, made of coral, and basically has a tiny fraction of the people. This incredible imbalance in both landscape and population is really the root of their entire story.
So the big question is, how did these two incredibly different places end up as one single nation? Well, their story is really one of colonial dreams, massive economic exploitation, and a shared, but definitely not equal, journey to freedom.
Even the names of the islands tell you a lot. When Columbus sailed past in 1493, he didn't even stop. He just started naming things. Antigua was named for an icon in a Spanish cathedral, and Barbuda, which means bearded, probably got its name from the island's fig trees. So think about it. From the very beginning, these islands were being defined by people who were just passing by.
And that colonial naming? That was just the start. The next 500 years would see these two distinct islands mashed together into a single country. It's a process that was really defined by three things: sugar, slavery, and a very long road to independence.
You can see the major turning points right here. The English arrive in 1632, and almost immediately, they set up a sugar-based economy. That absolutely brutal system lasts for over 200 years until slavery is finally abolished in 1833. But get this, it then takes another century and a half before the nation finally gets its full independence in 1981.
For centuries, the engine of this whole colonial project was sugar, and the fuel for that engine, it was people. Enslaved West Africans were brought to the islands in such huge numbers that they quickly and vastly outnumbered the European settlers. Now, this isn't just a footnote in a history book, it is the demographic and cultural bedrock of the nation that exists today.
Okay, so with that shared, and often painful, history as the backdrop, let's take a closer look at the unique identities of these islands and their people right now. Who lives here? What do they speak? What does their society actually look like?
And here you see the direct legacy of that history. Over 87% of the population identifies as being of African descent. It's a crystal clear reflection of those centuries of the transatlantic slave trade and the sugar economy that drove it. Language tells a really similar story. Sure, the official language of government and business is English, the colonizer's language. But the language of the home, of the street, that's Antiguan Creole. It's spoken by about 2/3 of the people, and it's this living, breathing proof of a culture that absolutely refused to be stamped out. And here's where things get really interesting in the modern era. 30% of the population wasn't actually born there. That is one of the highest rates in all of the Americas. It just goes to show you what a dynamic, modern society it is, attracting people from all over the Caribbean. We're talking Guyana, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, all looking for opportunities, mostly in that booming tourism sector.
So what does this mix of history and people actually feel like on the ground? Let's talk about what makes the economy tick and how the nation really celebrates its one-of-a-kind identity.
If sugar was the old king, well, tourism is the new one. And it's not just a big part of the economy, it is the economy. It makes up more than half of the entire GDP. That heavy reliance on tourists and cruise ships is a huge economic driver. But as we're about to see, it's also a massive vulnerability.
And of course, you can't talk about culture without talking about food. The national dish is fungi and pepper pot. The fungi part is this cornmeal dish, kind of like polenta, and it's served with pepper pot, which is this really rich, hearty stew. It's a delicious, tangible piece of what it means to be Antiguan and Barbudan.
And this is where it all comes full circle. The country's biggest party, Carnival, isn't just a party. It's a 13-day-long festival that directly celebrates emancipation from slavery. The incredible costumes, the music, the parades, it's all a celebration of freedom and resilience that's tied directly to the most important event in the nation's history.
But this is where our story takes a dramatic and, frankly, a devastating turn. In 2017, one single event exposed just how fragile the relationship between these two islands really was and raised some really tough questions about their future together.
95%. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many buildings on the island of Barbuda were damaged or flat out destroyed when Hurricane Irma hit. This Category 5 storm didn't just pass over the island. For a while there, it pretty much erased it.
I mean, the Prime Minister's words at the time said it all: barely habitable. The entire population, every single person, had to be evacuated to Antigua. It was a national catastrophe on a scale they had never seen before, and it put this tale of two islands into its sharpest, most painful focus ever.
And right after the storm, a political hurricane hit. The central government over in Antigua saw an opportunity to rebuild Barbuda with lots of private investment. But Barbudans, who have owned their land as a community for centuries, they saw something else. They called it disaster capitalism, using a catastrophe to force privatization on them. This huge clash over land, over climate change, and how to recover has sparked calls for something that used to seem impossible: Barbudan independence.
And that leaves us with the one critical question for the future. When you're facing the existential threat of climate change, and you have these deep, deep divisions over land and autonomy, can a nation that was born from two such different worlds actually find a single shared way to move forward?